The day started out like any other Tuesday. I remember because I had just poured myself a glass of orange juice. The sun was lighting up the room in that particular hue that made everything seem possible. My name is Anik Saha, and I believed in the power of friendship more than anything else in the world. I had spent the last 18 months of my life creating something spectacular, an application named Skill Bridge that was built upon artificial intelligence to teach anyone any skill. It was my life's work. Each bit of code that I had written was a part of my soul. I had built it with my best friend Randeep. We had spent countless evenings together, sharing pizza slices, failures, and successes. He would talk a mile a minute while I would be the silent listener. But together, we had complemented each other to form a perfect blend of dream and reality. This was our creation, and it had taken us years to build. But that Tuesday morning, everything changed. I walked into our office on the 15th floor, the building we had rented with the first round of funding that had come in, because I had shown them my prototype. My prototype, not his. I remember how the receptionist did not look at me the same way she did the other days. I told myself it was nothing, that she was having a bad day. I smiled at her, but the smile never reached her eyes. I walked into the conference hall, where Randeep was waiting along with 3 other men in designer suits. One of them belonged to Vertex Capital, the renowned acquisition firm that had bought the second largest deal in our industry. My heart was pounding in my ears as I walked towards them, but the moment of victory turned into stone-cold horror as Randeep said, "Anik, we need to talk about your contract." I looked at him, dumbfounded. What contract? We were best friends. We had spent years together building this prototype. The agreement was a mere formality between partners. But as Randeep slid the paper on the table in front of me, I realized with a jolt that the signature at the end was not mine. My hands trembled as I picked the paper up. According to the document, I was employed as a freelancer with no stake in the company. My ownership was a minuscule percentage, and my signature was a forgery. I stared at Randeep, but he looked away. "Anik, look at them," he said, nodding towards the suited men. "They have seen the papers. As per the agreement, you will vacate the premises immediately." A vacate. It was as if he had told me to crawl away and leave the room. Did he think I would just walk away, hands tied? Did he not remember the nights when I had taught him the fundamental codes of programming, while he had fallen asleep on my shoulder? I opened my mouth to retort, but the words stuck in my throat. The glass of orange juice I had in my hand slipped from my fingers and crashed on the floor with a resounding noise. The liquid pooled around the marble floor in bright orange streaks that reminded me of blood. For the first time since the morning, Randeep looked at me in the eyes. "Anik, this is business," he said finally. "Nothing personal. Nothing personal." He had cost me millions of dollars, and he was telling me it was nothing personal. The room spun around me as I stared at the floor where the glass had shattered. It was the same floor where I had walked in elation the day before, and it was the same floor where I had walked out in defeat a few minutes ago. As the realization of what had happened dawned on me, a terrible grief welled up within me until I felt like screaming right then and there. But Randeep had already stood up with the help of security when the realization hit me. That man wasn't real anymore. Not to me. Randeep Basu had become someone else entirely. A greedy beast that had devoured my dreams with one bite. The room suddenly seemed too small, and I could feel the weight of his gaze bore into my skull. As the security personnel led me out, my employees watched me go, several with tears in their eyes and others without remorse. They had been my employees, and I had trusted them. But walking away from them, now, was not as difficult as walking away from Randeep would be. It took 47 seconds for the elevator doors to open. I had counted the seconds, because there was nothing else to distract me. The next thing I knew, the doors had opened on the ground floor, and I was staring at the world through blurred eyes. I do not know how I got there, but I found myself in a small park 3 blocks away. I sat down on a bench and stared blankly at the world in front of me. The world continued its never-ending hustle without me. People walked their pets and children played on the swings. Suddenly my phone rang, and I saw Mira's name flash on the screen. Mira, my little sister, the only other Saha in the world who had never looked at me with disappointment in her eyes. I answered the call but did not speak. Anik, Mira's voice came over the line, heavy with worry. I saw the news. They did not mention you at all. Are you okay? She wanted me to tell her that everything was fine, that I was okay, that it was all a misunderstanding that would turn out to be nothing in the end. But instead, a wave of grief crashed down on me, and I found myself sobbing like a child on the park bench. Mira was at my side in a matter of minutes, wiping my tears away. Her law school books were tucked under her arms as she ushered me to my feet. "Let's go home," she said. "We need to sort this out. Mira is my sister, and she has always been my pillar of strength. When our parents passed away in a tragic car crash, it was Mira who kept me grounded. When Randeep and I started working on our prototype, Mira was the one who had helped me pull together the initial funding. She had graduated from college a year ago and was now in her final year of law school. Do you know where to start?" I asked her as we sat in the living room. Her laptop was open in front of us, and she wasted no time as she began searching for anything and everything that could help our case. "We need evidence that the contract was forged," I reminded her. Mira nodded as she began digging through my emails. There was a long pause before she responded. "Anik, do you remember my friend Priya? I asked her to look through your emails to see if she could find anything incriminating against Randy." I blinked back tears as a wave of memories washed over me. "She found emails," I said blankly. "Emails from when we were in college. Randy used to refer to me as his partner in the project. In fact, he once said that without me, the entire thing would be nothing." Mira stopped what she was doing and looked up at me with wide eyes. "Good," she said grimly. "Now we need proof of your contributions to the project." She looked back at the computer and then at me. "Anik, I think we need to start with the coding," she said. I stared at her in confusion. "What about it?" I asked. Mira looked back at the screen, where my face was reflected. "We need evidence of your ownership over the code. That way, it will also prove that Randeep was lying about you being his freelancer." Mira began searching through the emails again. "Here," she said after a few minutes. "This is an email from when your company was still conceptualized. It says, 'My coder is my partner in this endeavor.' This is from 18 months ago, so your ownership over the firm was supposed to be public knowledge." The next email said something similar, but was from the company lawyer. It asks Randeep if Anik is aware of the terms before the acquisition deal is completed. Suddenly, Mira had stopped. "There is something else," she said. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she clicked something. "Randeep was interviewed for a podcast last year. The entire conversation has been uploaded to YouTube. Let me find the link." She clicked something, and a video began playing. The next thing I knew, Randeep's voice was coming out of the laptop. "My co-founder, Anik Saha, and I acquired the initial funding to turn our idea into a reality. The room fell deathly quiet as his voice continued. He writes code in his sleep, and without his genius, I would be nothing. There was a collective gasp as everyone in the room looked up. It was as if the entire universe had stopped to listen to Randeep talk about how he owed his fortune to my abilities. Mira looked triumphant for a moment before turning back to me. "What else?" she asked. Randeep's lawyers began whispering frantically as their faces were masked in horror. There was nothing more needed, really. It was a done deal. The judge would listen to us, and the truth would finally come out in the open. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. It was bare except for the long set of wooden benches that stretched across the room. The judge was a woman with gray hair tied up in a bun. She presided over the court with what I could only describe as a mask of stone on her face. I sat next to Mr. Sen, the renowned lawyer Mira had hired. Next to him, my sister sat holding my mother's hand. She had not understood what had happened, but looking at her determined expression, it seemed as if she had understood exactly what the situation was. My father's passing had taken a toll on her, but she still looked up to me, and perhaps that was what kept her grounded. Randeep walked into the courtroom with his team of lawyers. He wore a sharp suit and had his hair perfectly combed, but the haunted look in his eyes was enough to tell me how much this meeting was dawning on him. He looked at my mother and then at me. He seemed to shrink under the judge's gaze, which was the first time I had ever seen him look so small. The judge asked for opening statements. It was Randeep's turn to say something, but he looked at his lawyers instead. They did not look thrilled as they stood up to speak. "Your Honor," one of them said, "the plaintiff is lying about his ownership of the company. He is disgruntled with his position as a freelancer and wants to change it." It was my turn to speak. I looked at Mr. Sen, who gave me an encouraging smile. I cleared my throat. "Your Honor, we do not have any opening statements. However, we will be presenting our case to you shortly." I looked around the room before connecting my laptop to the projector. "We will start with my contributions to the project. As you can see, the coding on GitHub has been continuously updated since the start of my involvement with the project 2 years ago." Everyone in the courtroom looked at the laptop screen as Mr. Sen continued. "The project's GitHub page is proof of Anik's contributions to the project. Your Honor, his username appears throughout the coding process, which implies that he is the sole creator of this application." There was a long pause before Mr. Sen continued. "The next set of evidence will pertain to the emails exchanged between the plaintiff and defendant." I watched as Mr. Sen's hands moved across the keyboard. "As you can see, the first email is dated 18 months ago and was sent by the defendant. The subject line reads, 'My coder is my partner in this endeavor.' The body of the email reads, 'Without him, this project would be nothing.'" There were gasps as the next email was displayed for all to see. It had been sent to the company lawyer and read, "Is Anik okay with the terms of the agreement?" I told him to trust me, and he did. There was an uproar as Randeep's lawyers objected, but it was quickly silenced by the judge's gavel. "What is it, Mr. Basu?" she asked. The lawyers looked at each other before one of them finally answered, "Your Honor, this evidence is fabricated. It is meant to mislead the courtroom into believing that the plaintiff is somehow entitled to ownership of the company." Randeep's voice trembled as he looked up from the documents in front of him. "Your Honor, please hear me out. This is a mistake." The whole courtroom was silent as he looked up from the documents in front of him. I stared at the judge, who looked as if she was about to say something. Instead, she looked at Randeep. Mr. Basu, can you explain why your co-founder has proof of his contributions to the project from before your company was registered, while your contract has no mention of his shares in the company? There was a long pause before Randeep answered. His voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough for everyone in the courtroom to hear. It was a mistake. All the color drained from my face as I looked at Randeep. That was the first time I had ever heard him admit that he was wrong about something. He had everything and had thrown it all away for greed. It was ironic, really. Greed had poisoned him, and in the process, he had destroyed his own life. The judge looked stunned. And what do you have to say for yourself, Mr. Sahib? She asked. I looked down at my hands. Your Honor, I believe Mr. Basu is being manipulated by his lawyers. The room fell deathly quiet as I continued. I understand his position and know that he did not mean to steal my shares in the company. However, I want him to know that greed does not discriminate, and it always ends the same way for those who fall victim to it. The judge looked at me for a long time. Finally, she said, the court finds the contract between Mr. Basu and Mr. Saha to be invalid. The acquisition deal between Vertex Capital and Skill Bridge is hereby cancelled. Additionally, Mr. Basu is to repay Mr. Saha all the money acquired through the fraudulent document. The judge was silent for a moment longer before she continued. Additionally, Mr. Basu is to be held accountable for his actions in court, as well as in the public eye. The room erupted as everyone rushed out, talking about the ruling that had just taken place. The courtroom doors had finally opened when I stepped out, and the whole world seemed to hush as I walked out. My employees greeted me, some with smiles and others with guilt etched on their faces. I did not stop to look at them. I only walked until I was in front of the conference hall doors. These were the same doors I had walked into a few hours ago, the doors that led to my demise. I pushed them open and was met with the sight of Randeep, who looked up as I walked in. His tie was loosened, and his face was red from crying. He stood up, looking at me for the first time since my arrival. Anik, I am so sorry, he said. It was all a mistake. I lost everything. My wife left me, and my investors are after me. Can you forgive me? His voice cracked, and he began to cry uncontrollably. His words hit me like a ton of bricks. This man had taken everything from me, and in the end, had even taken my happiness. But most of all, he had taken my dream, and all he could say was, "Can you forgive me?" I looked up at him, my eyes burning with anger. Randeep, you gave me the most valuable lesson of my life. You taught me that trust without proof is blind foolishness. You taught me that greed has a price, and that price is always too high for those who fall victim to it. He looked confused, and I suppose he was. After all, I had just said some of the most heart-wrenching words of my life. What are you going to do now? He asked. I am going to sell the company, I said. I am going to sell every single share of the company and donate 70% of the profits to a foundation for young developers. The rest of the money will go to me to start something new with. Randeep looked at me, bewildered. You're walking away. You built this company, this idea from the ground up, and you're just walking away. I stood up, looking at the ceiling. Yes, because winning this case was not what I wanted. It was never what I needed. All I wanted was justice for what happened, and now it has come. I turned to look at him one last time. And Randeep, winning this case was your punishment as much as it was my victory. I walked out of the room, leaving Randeep standing there in the hallway, stunned. The employees looked up as I left, but this time they did not smile or frown. They only bowed their heads in respect. I walked past the lobby and the receptionist, and took the stairs down instead of the elevator. I wanted to feel the 15 stories around me, to feel the distance between the top and the bottom. By the time I reached the first floor, I was soaked in sweat but felt alive. I walked out and met Mira, who embraced me tightly. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. I looked up at the sky, which was the same golden color as that fateful Tuesday morning. But I was no longer the man I had been back then. "I am going to start again," I said softly. "But this time, I will not have any partners or co-founders. I will start from scratch and build something with my own hands, something with my own mind, something that will never be taken from me. And Mira, I will protect myself with truth and knowledge instead of with walls. I will finally learn how to protect my heart."